Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, a special edition of Morning Joe's, kind of a hybrid between four different shows. Between Morning Joe's and Vikes of the RoundTable and Vikings on the Clock and SKOL Sessions. I am your host of Morning Joe's, Joe Johnson, owner of Purple PTSD, Vikings Territory, Purple Territory Radio, Disobedient Dog, as Ian discovered this week. Mr. Joe Oberly is out of town for Memorial Day. So, we are here with a couple of the MVPs of the Vikings Territory Purple PTSD Empire in Kirby O'Connor. First and foremost. What up, man?
It's me. Not much. I hear Joe Oberly didn't want to do the show because he's not committed enough.
That's right. He's slacking.
He likes to make the joke that I'm coming to steal his gig. That's why I'm saying that.
I know. He's probably going to drive by your house later, and he'll take the trip out to the West Coast if he has to. Our audience should be familiar with Kirby because he did actually, as he alluded to, fill in for Joe when he was on his cruise for 2 weeks, actually. So, welcome back, man, and let the people know that haven't listened since we've been blowing up in the last few weeks on iHeartRadio, kind of who you are, what you do, so on and so forth.
I am one of the editors of, I am the managing editor of PurplePTSD.com, I think is what we decided. That's what my title is, yeah?
Yeah, for now, but I like to keep people on
here.
a constant atmosphere of fear.
Joe, hold on.
Oh, no.
Talk to Ian.
Ah! What, hey, Ian.
What's up?
Ian's here, too. I don't believe... Have you been on Morning Joe's before?
Yeah, I was on the biggest show or whatever, remember?
Oh, yeah, the one that blew up. Duh.
Yeah.
It all blurs together because we just launched another show called The Lunch Break that we do on Periscope/Twitter Live. And we just recorded an episode of that the other day, so you should follow us on Periscope if you have a Periscope. We'll be doing that typically every Saturday. We did one, I think on Wednesday, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was Wednesday.
Yeah, because we were touring video studios, and apparently the greatest video where they shot Endgame based on the prices that we received. Yeah, let people know you're like who you are, your show, so on and so forth.
Yeah, SKOL Sessions. It airs Wednesdays as well. And so yeah, we'll get that 5th episode this Wednesday, so we can go on Apple Music and stuff.
Oh yeah, we're gonna everywhere, so people will be able to find SKOL Sessions on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. It might take a week or two. Some are faster than others, but keep an eye out for that because it's all good stuff. We wanted to kind of do a roundtable to just get through some of the news that's been happening. Obviously, OTAs were last week. There's been some tidbits out there of other just news and talkers that we talked a little bit about on lunch break, but we can delve into here as well. One of
they were coming in live during lunch break, so I don't know how.
Yeah,
we didn't get all of them,
and most of them were about my body mass index. So
not this time.
Oh yeah, that's true. It was more about LGBT rights and weird stuff like that.
Yep.
Not weird in the sense of that's weird,
talk.
but the people that ask those questions are weird. Yeah, and Bears talk. Thankfully, no 38-7 Eagles talk, which I always consider a win when we don't go down that rabbit hole. Kirby, you're back?
I am back. Sorry. Very professional. I didn't have the audio set up right for the video, so I'm going to have to do some finagling to get the beginning part in, but I got it now, so we're good to go.
You should overdub it, really, like do impressions of our voices at the very beginning, like a Chinese knockoff of a movie or something.
Like Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
One of the unfortunate stories from this morning, and Ian, I'll have you kind of break that news since you were the one that brought it to the table. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I just want to pay our respects because the legend Packer Bart Starr passed away this morning, and I just want to kind of pay my respects and show that, you know, we can respect talent, and we're not going to be the ones, you know, shitting on other people's graves or anything like that. He was awesome during his time as a Packer, and he was just a overall good guy, and I just want to pay my respects to him, and because he did bring, you know, enjoyable entertainment when you watch previous tape and things like that. So just sad to hear that Bart Starr passed away, and
how old
with
was he?
His family. I don't know. I think he was in his 80s.
Okay.
So old.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. You know, we one of the things that Oberle taught me early on when I was I said something personally negative about Cordero Patterson, and Joe is a great mentor in a lot of respects, but the part that I took away from it was that these guys are human beings too, and that, I mean, just from a professionalism standpoint, especially if you want to have access to the team, like insulting people's intelligence or whatever is not the best way to go. But a lot of the time we root for certain players to get cut, for example, on the Vikings, and it's like that's such a devastating thing for them to go through and for their family, and it's got to be really terrifying from just like a financial well-being standpoint. So we try to keep that in mind on the sites. Unless it's Aaron Rodgers, then death can't come soon enough.
I don't know about death, but, like, I mean, if he's going to die, it's probably going to be from a beer chugging contest.
That or his brother.
Or his mom.
So, yeah, OTAs were this week. I think there were a few talkers that we had that we'll get to. But I wanted to do the obligatory Kyle Rudolph update, because that's been the dominating topic, and it's funny to see all the different resources or competitors that we have and how they're talking about this now, because I think everybody is just ready for this to figure itself out. Yeah, it's one of the not that we're complaining, but it's one of the interesting parts of trying to cover a team 24 hours a day in the off season, or when there's a lot of rumors. It's just some stuff ends up dominating the coverage, and I'm sure the people, if you're a big enough Vikings fan to be listening to the show, especially live, you're relatively familiar with the situation, so we don't need to retread that. But it sounds like the most recent update, he was at OTAs. I think he flew in from out of town. He says all the right things about how he's a leader and he had to be there and that he wants to be a Viking, but also as a leader, he wouldn't have felt right if he wasn't there at OTAs. But
was that supposed to be a knock at Diggs?
I wonder about that. Do you guys know why Diggs wasn't there?
No.
Because tons of NFL big names don't do OTAs. There's a ton of people that don't, and I think wide receivers, big name wide receivers especially, don't show up.
And quarterbacks don't. Tom Brady wasn't at OTAs. Whatever.
Yeah, I know it's voluntary and that AP never did them. But if my memory serves correctly, he's done them before. Thielen was there. Not that it's a bad thing for him not to be there.
But it could be literally anything. He could have had a wedding to go to or something.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was another excuse or if he was just not there for that reason. So.
He was there one days. That's enough for me.
I say cut him. He's not a team player.
Trade him
to Washington, yeah.
Yeah.
or the Jets, since they seem to be the new Seattle Seahawks and that they want every player.
There was somebody commenting. There's somebody commenting on an article. I think it was on Bleacher Report's site that they were like, trade it because there's something about Stephon Diggs, and they were like, trade him because they talked about Diggs and Cousins, and they were like, trade him to the Kansas City Chiefs. And someone was like, wow, it'd be really confusing to trade Kirk Cousins to the Chiefs.
Was his name Chiefs Fan 15?
Probably, something like that. Chiefs Fan 420 XXX.
669 something.
69. Nice.
Yeah. So, back to Rudolph, I guess. Ben Gosling reported the 5-year extension they're working on that would check a lot of boxes. It would give him security, guaranteed money, I assume, for 5 years, but it would also lower his cap hit in 2019, which is what the Vikings need, as they clearly are up against the wall in regards to the salary cap. So, you guys, anything on the Kyle Rudolph thing? Kirby, I don't think that we've recently discussed this on the show, so just, Ian and I have gone on the record on the show and then also on the lunch break, and that's not to say that you can't also let people know what you think, but in regards to the Rudolph situation, I mean, would you be upset if he didn't end up on the team? What are your thoughts on Irv Smith Jr., so on and so forth?
I would be pretty upset if he wasn't on the team. Not like devastated. I think they could manage without him. They would figure that out with Irv Smith and David Morgan and Tyler Conklin. Between those three, they would figure something out. But I don't think that they're going to get the value for Rudolph that they want, like that he would be worth, technically. So I would be shocked if they move him, first of all. What
do you think they get, and what do you think he's worth?
Well, I think to the Vikings, he's worth a third round or higher. To other teams in the league, they would probably give up a fourth or fifth at the highest. Just because they know that there's Rudolph would essentially be a rental player unless he agrees to a contract extension right away.
Yeah.
But to the Vikings, he's obviously very valuable, and he's not only for the fact that he catches a lot of touchdowns, but for what role he's played for them and the organization as a whole. And I think that's why we will more than likely see. I think they'll figure something out eventually. I think it's just a matter of language and numbers at this point. And I think both sides do want to get something done.
And I think if something would have happened, it would have happened already in regards to a trade. Too much.
It probably would have happened before the draft.
That's what I was thinking, or that would be the best case scenario anyway, or even around the beginning of free agency. And it's one of those no news is good news situations, I think. It's been too long, even with the Patriots news coming out. But I wasn't sure how fresh that news was anyway, if they had reached out weeks ago and then we just heard about it.
I question some of that news anyways, because it's just written in a super long essay, Sports Illustrated article, where it just mentions that the Patriots have talked to the Vikings. It's well, what are the extent of that talk?
Well, and they could have. If Kyle Rudolph's available, there's probably 3 teams that didn't inquire.
I was going to say,
you know what I'm saying?
Teams usually do their due diligence and reach out anyway. So I completely agree with you on that.
And I'm with Kirby. I think something will get done. I think it's just a difference of language and guarantees and everything. I don't know if a 5-year extension will necessarily happen, but something will probably get worked out, and it's just a matter of what guarantees he thinks he's worth versus what the Vikings think he's worth, and what the Vikings want to guarantee, basically, because they are up against the cap this year and next year, and beyond that, who knows, because we don't have a quarterback signed after that. So they also have to keep that in mind.
Interestingly, I saw it on, must have been Connor. I think Connor was sharing it on Twitter. Some numbers of Rudy and his stats over his time, and he's consistently a top 5 to a top 10 like receiving tight end in the league, which I find interesting just because of the conversation by like I'll call casual fans on Twitter and Facebook is he's not even worth it. He's not even a top 10 tight end. What are you doing? But like the stats back up that, when healthy, he is one of the better tight ends in the league. And the tight end position is super valuable, not only in the NFL, but in this offense that we're supposedly going to start running.
Well, yeah. And I brought up that according to PFF, like the last 2 seasons, he's the number 1 tight end in drop rate percentage too. So with last year, he was only a 1.5% drop rate, and the year before he had a 1.7%
in a good way.
Like,
I was like, I don't
in a good way, yes. No, drop rate percent in a good way. But that's also tight ends with at least 50 targets too, because otherwise, if you don't go with at least 50 targets, David Morgan is number 1, but. Whatever.
Speaking of salary cap, I'll shoehorn in this topic because I wrote an article about it and I wanted your guys' take on it because I don't think we really talked about this on Slack. Just looking at the fact that the Vikings, have been just in the recent years relatively adept or just really good at through Rob Brzezinski, waving his magic wand and finding money and locking in a lot of these young core players to contracts through 2021, 2022. This offseason has been different. The last few off seasons they've had money to sign people like Sheldon Richardson, for example, or Cousins even. And it feels like, the best way to briefly describe the situation is how they this offseason had to convert Eric Kendrick's salary to mostly signing bonus because they didn't even have enough money to sign their first-round draft pick in Garrett Bradbury. And so my take on it, and maybe the title was a little too clickbaity, the title was that this season's basically an all-in season in every sense of the word. And mainly what I meant was that if they're going to win, the window of opportunity will be the widest this season, because next season you have guys like Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, Rudolph, depending on what happens there. I think there's the team option on Everson Griffin. And so unless they get Cousins to restructure, which I don't know how that would work.
After this season, it would have an extension.
Yeah. Okay. So that basically, it's not as if it's that the opportunity to win wouldn't be there next season, and I wasn't implying that if they don't make a deep playoff run that anybody should be fired. For example, one of the main people that responded, it was all over the place, whoever Job Bob is. And he was saying that it's all Spielman's fault, and I shouldn't blame Zimmer, even though I didn't blame Zimmer. And so, yeah, the crux of it seemed relatively non-controversial. It was just that the team as we know it is pretty stacked at every position this year, but their X amount of year plan seems to have led to this moment, right? Like, all the free agency, all the defensive draft picks, and then finally getting some offensive linemen in this season. I think their best chance would be this year, just from a roster perspective. We don't know how things are going to shake out with other teams hitting a peak or being hot at certain times, whatever. But yeah, just that I feel like if they're going to make a run, it's this season is their best chance.
Well, I'm going to kind of go off of that, and yeah, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I think a lot of the contracts, we even talked about the fact that, restructures are sometimes written in contract. It's not necessarily like Eric Kendrick's deal. It was written into his contract that at any time they can convert some of his money to a signing bonus and push some money down the line. And I'm going to argue that, a lot of teams are shy from doing that because it pushes money down and it makes their cap situation potentially harder the next year or the next year or the next year or whatever. But the new CBA agreement. So, how it works is...
you cut out a little bit there for a second, so...
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So So when you restructure, it converts, like, so let's say half his salary this year was turned into a signing bonus. So so that's like, I think 2.5 million. So what happens is that 2.5 million is then dispersed evenly through the next 4 years of his contract. And then all of it's guaranteed. So it is pushing money down the line, but at the same time, you're looking at, the new CBA agreement is coming up in a couple of years too, which is going to potentially skyrocket the cap situation or guarantee money and things like that. So it's going to totally change the game.
And we get about 10 million in more new cap space a year, I think, right?
Yeah, but that's usually calculated. It's usually closer to like 8 or 9. But that's just me being nitpicky. But yeah, so
never.
But like next year, we're already right up against the cap, even with that increase, with that expected increase. So something is going to happen with some of those players that we have written into, their contract, that the restructure is possible. I mean, Everson Griffin's cap is technically counting against that number next year and things like that, when it likely won't. But yeah, so you're looking at. I'm okay with pushing money down the line, just because of that new CBA agreement that's coming about, and let's make this year work. Let's make next year work.
I think a lot of people are, and I'm present company excluded on this, but I see this a lot online, that people are assuming that Hughes is going to be able to step in for one of the either Waynes or Alexander. I've seen a lot more in regards to Waynes. Based on, I don't know, wishful thinking, he looked good in the limited amount of time that we saw him, but we know how long it takes for first-round corners to kind of get up to speed in Zimmer's system, and it usually takes like 3 years. So I'm not comfortable with that assumption that all of a sudden...
And that's without an ACL tear.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and now all the stuff this week about Hughes potentially not being ready for week 1, so on and so forth.
I mean, I could play devil's advocate on that one and say that, like, we did have Holton Hill covering, like, a good portion of the season last year, and he did, like, a serviceable job. Like, sure, these guys aren't going to be up to the caliber that Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes have been, but, like, those guys play at all-pro level, like, almost every week that they're in there, at least. So I think
whoa! I feel like among Vikings fandom, if you say that Trey Waynes is playing at an All-Pro level week in and week out, you're going to get some flack there.
I agree with them, though.
Me too.
I think after last year, there might be a little bit of better general opinion on Trey Waynes, but I think we could see like a drop off of play, but like Hughes and Hill have the potential to be very serviceable, like NFL starters. Now, like that said, that doesn't bode well for like our top 5 defense, but
yeah,
you give some, you got to give something somewhere.
Have you guys seen the documentary The Moss Method?
No.
Oh, you should watch it. It shows Moss really how he trained and how hardcore he was down in Florida when it was like 120 degrees and 100% humidity. We should do like a Holton Hill method where all the new rookie DBs smoke a bunch of weed and take PEDs. That seems to be the way to speed up for 3 years.
Let's wait until after this like 40 race that Trey Waynes is in before all the fans say let's like get rid of him, let's not re-sign him. I bet after he wins that race, they're all going to be like, oh, he needs the biggest extension ever.
Yeah. I can't wait to see that college runner, that White Lightning, run against Ted Ginn. Have you guys heard about that?
Oh yeah.
$10,000 race. I am. He's like
that. Isn't he like a track star?
Yeah, he's breaking all sorts of records and the first sub 10-second 100-meter in college history or something, even though it wasn't wind legal.
Yeah, he supposedly like runs at Olympic pace. So,
and he does like other events. Then he's really like the long jump and stuff. He's super dope at that, I guess.
Well, I can't wait for Trey Waynes to beat Ted Ginn. That'll be fun.
He could do it.
Oh, he should be. Well, it'll happen because they're doing that 40 race. I'm pumped for it. I want to see that. I'm sad Jeff Badette isn't part of it, though.
I'm looking right at my notes. See if you can see it right there. I'm like, Jeff Badette, my hero. and he hauled in a 65-yard touchdown, it sounds like. from Cousins, which is exciting. That's another big thing. It was interesting to see. I think it was after the first day of OTAs, people were posting like highlights of Laquan Treadwell and saying like, you might, and it's like, dude, he does this every year where everyone's like, wow, he looks good uncovered because he's an NFL wide receiver. He's going to look good
in shorts.
Exactly. But then apparently he's been struggling with drops, which we are all used to. I feel like that ship has completely sailed. I think it was Reed Johnson of the Writes for Us, and he owns Purple Rain News, which I finally got right for the first time. Wrote an article late last night about how Jordan Taylor has overtaken him in OTAs, and that's not a huge surprise. The question is whether or not they'll cut him.
It is to Kirby.
It's not a huge surprise, but like I have reasonings behind Jordan Taylor not.
Yeah, man. Let's talk about it, because you wrote an article about it that blew up, I believe.
That Taylor isn't going to make the roster, right?
Well, I think it's going to be tough for him because, like, if we look at it, if we look at it just from like a numbers perspective, you've got Thielen, Diggs. Those are locked in. I think I projected like 6 spots for receivers because I think that's what we have carried in the past.
Ian did too on his 53 man. So you guys are on the same page there.
You got Thielen, Diggs. I put Treadwell and Chad Beebe in there. Beebe because like he has a bunch of potential as a returner, and he played like a decent amount last year. I put Treadwell in there just because like he seems to always like it's very difficult, I think, for the team to give up on the fact that they have a bunch invested in him. Like I think Ian and I talked about this a little bit at some point, how they kind of play like the money a little bit, where they'll keep a guy and they'll try to put him on the field because they're paying him a lot of money. I think that was a discussion we had about Mike Remmers because they just refused to like let another guard take over.
Well, and with Treadwell, I think and we've had this conversation too. I don't want to use his dead money as an excuse because that money is going to be basically dead regardless of if you keep him or not. And so I don't want to use that, but I do think that this front office has a hard time saying, "Oh, we screwed up," like especially when it comes to their draft picks and higher draft picks at that. Like they're almost unwilling to be like, we got to give up on this guy, even though he's horrible and almost causing like bringing the team down a little bit at times, rather than. And
at this point, I feel like to add to that, they're maybe sacrificing the future by with a lot of the talent they have at the wide receiver position, losing a guy.
Potential talent.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's like my next point was that if you assume those 4 are going to make the roster, then you've got 2 other spots for Brandon Zylstra, Jeff Badette, Dylan Mitchell, Olabisi Johnson, Davion Davis, and
Alexander Hollins.
So you've got 6 other guys that are fighting for a spot with Jordan Taylor. So like just the numbers are kind of against him in that situation. And then you look at like we had Kendall Wright last year, and like different years, different situations, of course. But like we had Kendall Wright last year, who was 28 at the time, like just turned 28. I'm pretty sure.
Was
like a 11 or 1,300 yard season under his belt,
like a career year.
Yeah. He was he was the number 1 on the Bears roster like the year before, and like he was established. He had a bunch of touchdowns and like a whole bunch of yards in his career, and then he came in with us and couldn't even make the team. And like we had guaranteed money in him. Like we had a decent amount of guaranteed money in him. I think it was something like 700. Like the essentially the vet minimum was like guaranteed, and then like there was everything else was not.
So I think that's a really good example because I think the reason he didn't make the team is because he was too one-dimensional. He was a really good slot guy, but you have to look at how often Thielen especially plays in the slot, and then look at, especially now, this is different again, but with Kubiak, and I keep hammering this point home, but it's I think going to be very important in regards to who they keep. with limited roster spots, they're going to want guys who can do more than one thing, like you guys alluded to with returning punts, for example. And I think that goes against Treadwell because he is such a one-dimensional guy, and he's not even good at that one dimension. So I can't imagine, outside of pride, them keeping him on the roster.
What are you talking about? He blocks like crazy, Joe. He's a great blocker.
Okay, put him at tight end then.
Right guard.
But like going back to Jordan Taylor though, you also have to look at the fact that Joe brought it up. Gary Kubiak, he knows Kubiak's system a little bit too, so I think that he could have that leg up on players like even Chad Beebe. Like I think he's gonna have a leg up even on him, and you saw that Taylor was the first one that they put into first team over all those other guys. Yeah. And I mean it's OTAs, and OTA is wide receiver hype season, like it is. I've heard hype on all the wide receivers, except for maybe Alexander Hollins. But
Zylstra's got to be done too. I mean, I don't know what happened.
Zylstra's getting all the hype though too. Like
he's a Minnesota boy, that's why he's getting all the hype. Like,
true.
Everybody wants him to be the next Adam Thielen. Is why.
Yeah.
I was really, I never heard an actual conclusive narrative as to what happened last year. I know. One of the last shows we did with Luke Braun, he had said that he had a source that was saying that Zylstra was struggling with the playbook and the complexity of it versus like the CFL, or maybe not having those weird trapezoidal end zones or whatever the hell they're doing up there. Which I was surprised.
I don't know CFL rules too. I know when I was a kid, couldn't you catch it off a bounce? We would joke that you could.
There's not enough
rugby.
Poutine.
Yeah.
There's not enough poutine in the stadium. He doesn't know what's happening.
But I feel like if he didn't come through last year with less competition and the fact that the Vikings outbid other teams to get him, that it's not going to happen this year. So I checked him off my list anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I had
did he do much last year? He returned some punts, but he even muffed a couple of them.
And then I think he disappeared for a while too.
Well, I think I was looking at snaps between him, BB, Treadwell, and Robinson, just because I was looking at that, and he had the least amount of snaps between the four of them. So and all of his snaps were on special teams, so he didn't see not all of them. I think he saw the field for less than 5 offensive plays last year, in regular season games. So it was. I don't think he's going to make it. But going back to Jordan Taylor, another one of my points, which I think is actually a really important point, is the fact that he's coming off of a lost season where he also just came off of 2 hip surgeries.
Yeah,
which obviously he seems healthy and he's healthy enough to participate, but I just wonder how that's going to hold up once he gets into real contact and gets taken down and gets slammed onto those hips.
Can he still run a 4.5?
Who knows?
The building on the 4.5 thing, the fact that he is 6'5", I think helps because he's by far the biggest receiver on this team. We've Jason Wisnowski from Vikings Spin wrote a really great article a couple weeks ago breaking down the receivers into groups, possession guys, big guys, speed guys. And I think that the fact that Taylor can return punts, he's big and fast, he kind of can fit into all three. I'm not sure how good his hands are either, or route running. I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, his hands are good.
That touchdown, he's made some crazy catches.
That first touchdown he had was sick. I'll throw this juicy bone out to you guys, starting with Kirby. If you could only between BC Johnson and Dylan Mitchell, who do you like more?
Dylan Mitchell, 100%. At least at this moment, just because looking at his college tape and I don't know. Obviously, I'm kind of a product of the hype too because he's crazy hyped up. But looking at his college tape, he just catches the ball and then he made things happen. He's not just he runs good routes and catches it and then goes down. He's really big on yak yardage.
And that's your neck of the woods too, right? Where he played his college ball. I mean, was he a pretty big deal there?
From the little bit that I paid attention to the Ducks last year, yeah, he was huge. He was like the second biggest star on the team behind Justin Herbert, the quarterback, who for some reason didn't declare, but like he's going to be in this year's draft. So Justin Herbert is like my pick for. Sorry, this is going past it, but Justin Herbert is my pick for number 1 quarterback next year. So
that's actually a good little teaser for the fans too, because you and I have been kind of texting one another about doing perhaps a new site to add to the Empire that would focus on scouting reports and NCAA stuff, since that's where your heart is a lot of the time, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I love to watch football just in general, so like it's nice to be able to, like, on a Thursday night, once college football season starts, to be able to watch football on like a Thursday night, and then on Friday, and then on Saturday, and then the NFL on Sunday, like, just to be able to watch football like 4 days in a row and like be able to think about it, that's like huge for me. So, and also the college game is just a lot of fun. Like there's so much passion between like the teams and the rivalries that like it's such a different beast from the NFL, because the product is like way worse. Yeah, but like it's lot fun.
More like big plays and weird comebacks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, it's crazy. I love college football.
It's a lot of fun to scout. I don't watch college football like just for the heck of it, but I scout a lot too. But going back to the Mitchell or Johnson debate, see, I'm going to go kind of opposite to Kirby. I want to keep Dylan Mitchell too, but for different reasons. I actually think Olabisi Johnson is more pro ready right now. And so that's why I understand if they decide to keep him over Mitchell, but I think Mitchell's potential is so much higher.
Yeah, I've heard that Mitchell's really pro ready also in regards to his instincts anyway.
He is, but it's not on the level of BC. Like BC's pro readiness, like I think he could go and be a number 3 wide receiver on a lot of teams right now. And but I don't think he's going to be really more than a wide receiver 3 on any teams either.
What do you mean ceiling?
What do you mean by pro ready?
So like his route running, his hands, I think his route running is more crisp than Mitchell's. His hands are really good too, and he's just going to be that safety net for a lot of quarterbacks, I think, and he's the one that's he's gonna make it in this league. I promise you that, but I don't know if it's going to necessarily be with this team. I really hope we can sneak him on our practice squad if we decide to keep Mitchell. But kind of going off of that, I did a poll on Twitter a couple days ago, where I told people you could only keep, and I think Kirby would probably agree with this, that you can only keep one of Mitchell, BC, Badette, or Zylstra. Keep one of them.
Unless you cut Jordan Taylor.
That's rough. No, he's saying, I mean, but he just had the theoretical situation.
But regardless of who the other people that stay on the team are, I think of those 4, you can really. Who won the vote was Mitchell, by a decent amount, but Zylstra was second, which kind of surprised me.
Well, yeah, it's the homers that don't really know a whole lot of the. That's a hard one, man, because I like Mitchell, but I like, being 12 when Randy Moss was a rookie completely changed everything for me, and having a guy like Badette who's just incredibly
But you talk about
fast.
what Nick Pony is.
I know. I know. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him to know any of those other things, but I just love the idea of him being that fast.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I went to training camp a couple days last year, and the amount of drops I saw by Badette was not good.
Okay. Yeah, there's that. Yeah. And because I'm also thinking of who's going to replace Al Robinson, who just would come off the bench, and I think of 4 of his first 5 catches were touchdowns. So having a speedster that can just come out and burn one every 6 quarters might be cool.
Well, a lot of those guys are fast. Mitchell and BC are pretty fast too. Not Jeff that fast, but nobody's Jeff that fast.
I am.
Nobody's Jeff that fast.
Have you guys seen me?
Yes, we've seen you, Joe.
I know. Everyone has. And they've made it clear. Any final thoughts on the wide receiver thing? I feel like, Kirby, you were going to say something, and then my joke ruined it.
Just that, like, I think a lot of keeping the potential depends on what you want to do with Jordan Taylor, because, like I said at the end of my article, that I hope he surprises me and I hope he becomes a diamond in the rough, and I hope he does really well this season. But I just also was, hedging my bets by saying that, like, I don't think he makes the team still, because I just think, like, there's a lot of factors against him. He has to perform really well, and he has to show out, more than the talent and the potential that is also going to be in training camp. And I know Ian's disagreeing with me right now.
So here's the thing, and I'll go back to, Joe mentioned Jason's article, Viking Spin, where he put them into groups, and he had Taylor, Zylstra, and Treadwell all in the big group. And he argued that you can really only keep one of them, and I would maybe agree with that. So I think, if the team does keep Treadwell, which I'm hoping they kind of don't at this point, just give up. Sorry. I'm ready to give up. But even though I have his jersey.
What?
But I do, yes.
Kirby, can you mute him?
Hey, I just said up on him. It's fine. So I think if you're keeping someone like Taylor, you have to probably say sayonara to Treadwell.
Yeah, I mean that makes total sense. Well, and I'll say that I disagree with the premise that you have to keep, like, certain types of wide receivers.
I know,
and because you can keep, like, all fast guys, and, like, especially with Thielen and Diggs on the roster, you have two of, like, not Diggs so much, but, like, Thielen is pretty versatile. Like, he can play. He's not going to be big. He's not going to be the big receiver. He's not going to get the jump balls, but, like, you can run two tight end sets with Rudolph and Irv Smith and have a big receiver out there. Like, assuming we keep Kyle Rudolph, you can have a big receiver out there. So, like, I don't know if that big target needs to be a wide receiver, but, like,
but I think you could argue that Taylor is what someone like Taylor was what they were hoping Treadwell would be when they drafted him.
Yeah. I think you could, yeah. I think that's definitely
contested
possible.
Balls. I always do say too, and I'll say this really quickly, that they drafted him both before they knew what they really had in Thielen, and also when they had Teddy. Really, yeah, and when they had Teddy, and when their offense was predicated on really, like, 10 to 15 yard button hooks that were typically contested, because Teddy didn't have as many throws in his repertoire as Cousins or even Bradford did. So he fit that offense theoretically a lot better than he does now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And, like, the last point I'll make on Taylor, the last thing I'll say about it, and then everybody,
promise,
I will shut up. Well, the last thing I'll say on this show about Taylor, I can't guarantee about in the future, is that, like, I think his and a few other people's return ability is, like, hyped up, like their punt return ability, but I don't know, like, looking at his average and looking, like, how he did it, like, I don't know that he's going to actually be that good of a punt returner. I don't, but, like, also we've been spoiled for the last, how many years because of Marcus Sherrill. So I guess maybe I just don't know, and I'm expecting too much.
That's going to be a huge loss too, man. I don't.
And Reiff, I think people underestimate how
Reiff.
So non-kicking, like field goal kicking, Prefer was a top, like, 5 special teams
I'll give
coach.
him that, but that's such a huge thing to be.
But I think we're gonna miss him when it comes to the return game. We are.
He averaged a new punter and a new kicker every, like, season and a half. That's
I'll
bad.
Trade the kicking. I'll trade the returning for just, like, being able to kick field goals.
Yeah,
that's just like your Vikings, like, soul saying that. But, like, if you try to take that out of it, realistically, returning is probably more important.
If you're not horrible at kicking and you don't miss 2 field goals in overtime or whatever.
Well, it also depends. It also depends on what kind of style your team plays. Because if you're in a bunch of close games that are going to come down to a few points,
games.
You could argue that. But I guess on the flip side, you could argue that the returning and the field position matters just as more in those games as kicking field goals. So I guess I see your point, Ian. I just also like you said, am jaded, and I just want to see us make field goals.
Yeah, and I mean that's assuming that
Viking soul.
But I think it's especially for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, being able to make clutch field goals is super important. I'll give up 3 to 5 yards extra per return over that.
So since we're talking about it, why haven't we brought in a kicking coach yet?
Well, I found really interesting the last time that Chris Cluey was on was on Morning Joe's. He said that no football team from high school to college to the pros actually has none of the coordinators, special teams coordinators, know anything actually about kicking in regards to.
I've been asking for a kicking coach for the past 4 seasons.
They don't actually if for example, if something's wrong with Cluey and his average is terrible or his hang time is just terrible, they basically say fix it. They don't say let's look at the tape and see what you're doing wrong, because they don't know. And I found that astounding. And I also told him, dude, you could be a consultant that does that and could make a ton of money just by helping. Because, I mean, those guys have to basically do it all on their own, and I'm sure that they have, their own people that they trust in that regard, but they probably have to, hire a 1099 contract guy to come in and analyze their freaking motion. I mean, at least golfers have caddies. You think a freaking kicker would.
I really don't understand that. That doesn't make especially in the day and age that we live in with analytics and talking about averages and everything. How hard would it be to employ one guy to look at who knows kicking?
Yes.
There's plenty of former kickers out there who
So would it be one guy or would it be 2? Do you think? Because how
for kicking,
different?
One for punting.
Yeah,
it could be
even
2.
Even
if you need to hire 2 guys, just do it.
Yeah, even so, unless the NFL, for some reason, doesn't allow that position to be created, but, that doesn't... I don't know why they would.
Doesn't...
Other teams have it. Other teams have a kicking coach.
Okay, because he made it seem like it was a college thing, too. So, yeah, I feel especially with the struggles the Vikings have had in that regard, that they would have done that.
I don't get it.
It blew my mind. Another thing that blew my mind was a lot of people... We're saying, well, we don't know for sure if Bradbury is going to play center or if Elflein is, and I think we saw this week what the team was going to do. Zimmer, when asked about this after the draft, I think he said that they weren't sure either, but that they were going to make a decision soon. It seems like they've done that, and they made the right choice and the obvious choice. I mean, both of them won the Remington Awards at center, but it's clear that Bradbury is a once-in-a-generation type guy. Not really a generation, but for the Vikings anyway. He seems to be really good at football.
So it was really funny, too. I think even Elflein had a quote this week that said, Bradbury is a center and a guard, and I'm a guard and a center, too. And just how he phrased that, he said that he was a guard and center.
Which position first? Yeah.
Yeah, how he phrased it. He put himself as a guard first. So, it was just interesting how he phrased that.
I like it. I like the move. I keep going back to the Elflein as a rookie quote where he says he feels a lot more comfortable playing guard, and just that side of the line now I'm a lot more encouraged by. But I've also seen a lot of people, maybe they're just looking for topics to talk about or to write about, but saying that will the Vikings cut Reiff this offseason and save, I think if they cut him after the 1st of June, they save over $9 million in cap space. But even the articles basically say, but then what do you do? Move Brian O'Neill to the left side and then Rashad Hill to the right side? And that scares me because Reed Johnson wrote an article yesterday or the day before about Brian O'Neill missing the first day of OTAs with an undisclosed injury and having Rashad Hill there, and I guess Cousins got drilled a couple times, and it kind of showed the lack of depth that they have at the tackle position. But I don't, moving. There's no guarantee flipping O'Neal to the other side will work. I just don't believe in once you've gotten some sort of depth or assumed quality at the line that they should make a massive move like that, especially with no real backup plan. There's other ways that they can get money, and I would be completely. I mean, if they want to do that after the season, that's another conversation. But as a surprise camp,
the tackle class looks awesome next year.
And knowing the Vikings will probably have a top 5 pick, so that's good. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on the line in general? I mean, I know I threw like 3 different things out there.
Well, I think about when you talk about the Reiff talk, if you get let go of Reiff, like, I think, how good is Oli Udoh going to be? But I think truly if you cut Reiff, you have to look at someone like Ryan Schrader that the Falcons designated with a post-June 1st cut. But he's strictly a right tackle too, so you'd have to move O'Neal over to the left side still, which I think would be okay. I'm not as against it as most people, but I still would prefer not to.
Let him build on what he's done, and what he's done so far has really exceeded expectations and made me very, very excited. While I am also eating crow at the same time because I hated that pick at the time. But I had people that I really respect at camp saying that if he hadn't been a second-round pick, he would have been cut. That's how bad he was. That's how bad his form was. His hands were horrible. Everything was bad. And then all of a sudden, he I don't know if he just figured it out or whatever. But that was actually when we flew Luke Braun in to go to camp. It was his takeaway from it.
Really? So, where do you think this line ceiling is? Do you think this line ceiling is average, or do you think it can be above average?
No, I think they could be above average, man. I mean, Bradbury is a stud. I think Elflein's a stud. I think Reiff can be a lot better if he has good players next to him. I really like the Samia pick. I think he's used to playing on the best line in the country. I think that really helps, and he's kind of been lost in all the Bradbury talk, but that could be huge. They have some depth with Klein and others, and then obviously O'Neal gave up 1 sack last year, and he was playing next to arguably the worst or a bottom 3 right guard in the entire league. So I think it might take them a while to gel, but I think they could be good, especially when it comes to the run game and some of the I mean, if you watched Bradbury's tape, what he's been able to do in the run game too, and God, I'm really bullish on the line, which is a weird thing to say.
I think realistically,
I know, pump the brakes.
I think realistically, like the like ceiling for this line, like this season, is like an average NFL line, which is like all we need out of our line. But I think like realistically, their ceiling is like average. But I think they have a much higher like floor than we've seen out of our lines in the past. Like, is I think the biggest thing, because like I don't think they're going to be 32nd in the league anymore. I think they're going to be 20 to like 22 at like the lowest.
Oh, yeah.
So like that's like my low point, and then like high point is like ranked as like 14 to 16, somewhere in there.
15.
Yeah, something like that.
Someone you didn't mention that I'm really excited about is Josh Klein. I think he's gonna be really good for us. You did? I missed you saying his name.
As a depth piece.
No, but I think he's gonna be the starter at right guard.
I do too, but I think that might change.
I think Samia has a better chance of taking over left guard over Elflein.
No.
Than he does. Yeah.
Nah.
It's hot in here. It's hot in here, guys. Hot takes. Jeez.
Hot take.
I think it's going to be the best line in the history of the NFL.
More than anything, I think it's something that me and Kirby talked about too, and he brought up this tape already that they refused to move Remmers off the line, even though he was garbage. So like
they should have never moved. I mean, I know I get it why they did.
they're paying Klein to be the starter right now. So, like, how much is that going to play into the fact that he's going to be the starter?
Yeah. I mean, he stays healthy too, which helps, and which also means he'll probably blow his Achilles tomorrow. But
so I'm going to bring up Reed Johnson's other article about who would be, knock on wood, the hardest to lose. And we're talking about all this, like, you know,
he wrote that article?
Yeah. Who would it? I mean, Cousins excluded, because I think that's every team. It would hurt to lose the starting quarterback. But, like, you know, Diggs and Thielen we talked about, Harrison Smith we talked about. But I think, you know, either one of the tackles should be talked about too. Like, if we lose either of those tackles, we're relying on Rashad Hill to be a starter. Ugh.
Rashad Hill, yeah.
I mean, I could argue, I'm not going to necessarily, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for Rashad Hill, that, like, if we lost Brian O'Neill and Rashad Hill had to play right tackle for, like, 6 games, it wouldn't be as bad as, like, having Tom Compton start last year. Like, and that's a really low bar.
Tom Compton was better than Mike Remmers.
Yes, but, like, that's not even...
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Rashad Hill, I think, is a serviceable backup. Not a good starter, but he's a serviceable backup. So don't talk shit about my man, Rashad.
I think well, so, like, let me put it this way. For what Rashad Hill is getting paid, he's, like, the top backup tackle in the NFL.
Well, also like what you gave up to get him, which was absolutely nothing, because we poached him from Jacksonville's practice squad in the middle of the season.
Yep.
I wanted to throw this out there, too, because I know from talking to Ian that I'm surprised instead of the Treadwell jersey that you don't have a Amada Alpha jersey, but maybe you do. We talked about this on the lunch break, I believe. You're a big fan of his, and there's been some news this week that they're looking at him on the defensive line at the 3-tech position, and I wanted your guys' thoughts on that. I'll start with Ian since he's your jam.
So I really love Mataafa, and I love his potential, but I think he's going to have a harder time making the roster as a 3-tech than he would have if they would have put him at, like, a linebacker position.
Okay. What do you love about him? His eyes?
So, like, what?
His eyes?
Yeah, pretty much. I just, like, he's my Channing Tatum. No, but I think, like, he reminds me, when he's at the 3-tech, he reminds me of a lesser developed John Randall. And that's not just his size, like, because obviously he's undersized for that position. But we're so deep at 3-tech and defensive line right now, too, that I hope he gets his true shot, because I think he could make the roster. But I think that, when you look at, draft capital used, they're probably going to give Jaleel Johnson and Jalen Holmes more gusto, and then so who makes the roster? It's probably between Mata Afa and Armand Watts, who they drafted this year.
From Alabama?
No,
Arkansas.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting look, but I really like Mataafa. I really liked him going into last year too, and his injuries sucked. I think he would have had a better chance making the roster last year than he does this year.
What do you think about his size or skill set made them move him?
I'm not worried about his size. Well, he played mostly 3-tech in college. Okay. That's where he played. But he's just really small. So I think that they had him run a little bit with the linebackers last year, but I think that might have been where he tore his ACL, was when he was running with the linebackers. So I don't know, maybe that's why they moved him back to 3-tech. But I think, or maybe he just didn't look as good with the linebackers. I don't know.
Any thoughts on that, Kirby?
I'm going to be honest. I don't have strong feelings either way about Mata Afa.
Just his name, though. I just want his jersey.
It's a good name. It's a great name. Like I hope he makes it, because, like, he's got a dope name. But I think just in general, like, you always want to see these kind of like guys who've had a tough time or like had injuries. You want to see them come back strong and like, because they're usually like the most resilient, like the biggest like chip on their shoulder type players. They play with like more heart than the guy who's like just coasted through like to make his roster spot. Like, I mean, case in point, a little bit, Laquan Treadwell. Like,
I was gonna say that.
Laquan Treadwell versus Marcus Sherrills.
Yeah.
Right, like it's crazy. Like, you see the amount of effort these guys put in, the amount of work, and not that like top players don't also put in a bunch of work, but like when you know your spot is secure and you don't have to work for it. Like, there's like plays where you're not gonna give it your all. Like, you're not gonna, it's the sweep away from you or the pass that or the run play that's not coming to your side as a receiver. You're not gonna block hard for that. If you know that like you don't have to, because you're not worried about missing your spot, and like that's just the nature of humans, is like, if we're not super worried about like securing our position, like we're not gonna give everything we have, compared to a guy who's like, I'm fighting for my life on this team, I'm fighting for my position in life, like all the time, like I'm gonna give it my all every single play. So yeah, I think just like effort and like is huge. Like, and I hope he makes it for like that aspect alone.
Yeah,
I think you could also bring up clearly the Vikings hold him in high regard because they put him on IR when he tore his ACL and they didn't cut him. So I think that shows that they like what they see in him too.
What did you guys take from Anthony Barr saying that the offense looked vastly improved? I think he was referring mostly to the scheme and what he liked about the scheme. But I kind of felt
shorts
a little premature also. But knowing that it was maybe a scheme thing, it made it seem less so to me, just because maybe he, again, seeing what Kubiak is kind of whipping up. And I think that not enough has been said about Kubiak in regards to the impact that he'll have this upcoming season. If you look at like his history of going to struggling offenses or struggling teams, and his ability to turn teams that were in the lower 20s or even in the 30s in regards to offensive output or their record or so on and so forth, it's pretty astounding what he's done in his career. Turning a lot of those teams in 1 year, in his first year, into top 10 units. And I was really perplexed by the move, and I wasn't against it because I think that Stefanski, while obviously they had that amazing first game when he was in charge with 1 million rushing yards, and everyone was talking about, DeFilippo, they're sticking it to him. They also played against an objective.
They played against
defense.
Miami,
the worst run defense in the NFL.
I mean, those holes, I could have gotten 100 yards rushing, and then I would have died. But I think that it was a good move. I applaud Stefanski if unless they just concocted this story to kind of save face. But he said that it was his idea to bring Kubiak in, and that he was, once he heard that he was available, and that he was like super into it. Having him in the room, having Dennis in there, just in conjunction with some of the improvements that we think they'll have on offensive line, I think is huge. So I look at what Barr said in that regard too, and say like, man, this really could be night and day from last year in regards to running the ball and just everything.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. What else could he be talking about? Because truly, like the starters are almost all the same, except for, Bradbury and Klein are on the line. So like, what else was he talking about? What else could he be talking about other than the scheme?
That one catch Treadwell had?
And Taylor is there instead of Treadwell.
Yeah, like...
yeah,
and I mean Diggs wasn't even. He was there for one of the days. It sounds like
one of the days. Yeah.
I think it's interesting to like think about like his statement, because obviously like we can take everything you hear from OTAs with a grain of salt, because like can't say that. I said I wasn't going to talk about Jordan Taylor anymore. But basically, take everything from OTAs with a grain of salt. But like, I think Anthony Barr saying that, yeah, it has to be more indicative of the fact that the offense probably looks good and probably looks like they know what they're doing. Like, I don't know. I can't speak to what happens in the actual practices and like what that looks like from a defensive perspective. But with how predictable sometimes and like terrible our offensive play calling has been over the past few years, you have to imagine that just sitting back on defense, like facing it in practice every day, you got to be like, this is bad. Like, especially for like high intelligence players like Barr and Kendricks and those guys, they got to know that like this offense, it does not look good, scheme wise. And I think there was a lot of times where like we were bailed out by lucky plays or like really good players in Thielen and Diggs, where like this scheme didn't really allow for them to like play to their best. Now, obviously, the one exception to that is the year with Pat Shurmur, just because Pat Shurmur seems to be an offensive not like an offensive genius, but he certainly played to his strengths better than like DiFilippo or anybody else that we've seen.
I mean, there was a point last year where Zimmer openly said to the media that he called Cousins on a Monday after a loss and said, do we need to like cut the playbook down by 25%? Is it too complicated? I think it was I think, and this could be me just misinterpreting things, but I think DiFilippo perhaps bought into his own hype a little bit, or was playing. Maybe he got the job solely because of what Doug Peterson did to Zimmer in that NFC Championship game, so he thought he had to come in and run a really complex offense with all these, just unnecessary things. When you have a team with this many playmakers, you don't necessarily need to be super complicated either. I think if you simplify things and play to your strengths, like you said, the sky can be the limit, but you don't need all that crazy shit.
So let me ask you this: come Sundays, who's calling the plays on offense? Is it Kubiak or is it Stefanski?
I think it's Kubiak.
Yeah, I think it's Kubiak.
I mean,
so do you think?
He hired all his guys. I mean, the personnel decisions were his.
So is Kubiak's just like we didn't want you to leave, so we're giving you the OC position? Like,
yeah, it seems to be that, or they didn't think Kubiak would be available, and then he was, and then this is the compromise.
Or is Kubiak the backup plan if Mike Zimmer fails the next 2 years?
That could be it too, or demote Zimmer to defensive coordinator, since that's his job anyway. I mean, he doesn't really do much at all with the offense. I don't know. There are other examples of that, but I don't think it's Zimmer to me is completely hands off with the offense. Like, he just lets the coordinator take over the entire thing, which they should, but he doesn't even seem to chime in during the game when the Vikings have the ball. And I bring this up all the time, but I think it's, even if it's not 100% true, it's a very good example of that. And if you look at when the Vikings have the ball, Zimmer's headset is on mute because his microphone is tilted up, and that always bothers me because as a guy who's such a defensive genius, you think he would be assisting by saying, okay, this is the, it seems like they're running this play or they're exploiting this, and he can do that, but the fact that he has to unmute his mic to do so, it just seems like a really good example of what I'm talking about, even if it's not like 100% the case. With that, there was one more thing. I'll grab my notes that I think I wanted to talk about. Well, since
can I throw out I'll throw out a quick topic.
Sure.
So apparently George Patton is in the talk to be the Jets GM. How big a loss do you guys think that would be?
First of all, I alluded to this earlier. The Jets seem to love what we're doing.
Jets,
Barr, Bridgewater, they tried to take Badette. now
they took like our bad offensive linemen, right? Weren't they all
Tom
in
Compton.
on like Brett Jones? They took Tom Compton. They wanted Brett Jones. Like,
yeah, they're like what the Seahawks were 10 years ago. I remember what the other topic was.
I mean, I have feelings about the Jets. They stole Blake Cashman as well, so that's not.
Yep. Yeah. I liked. Was that you that wrote that Cashman article? It was, wasn't it?
Sure was. Yeah, that was me.
I feel like as long as the Vikings, and this is gonna, because I've had some critiques for this person, as long as the Vikings have Spielman and Brzezinski, I think they're fine.
okay. Do you think that
Unless they're fighting World War II, since Patton.
But like, I think after these 2 seasons, a lot of if we don't win a Super Bowl in the next 2 seasons, a lot of people are going to be calling for Spielman's head. So,
I mean, there's a ton of that out there right now.
I know, right?
Yeah, there's just so many people who already want it, and I don't understand. But
okay, so here's how I feel about.
I think you would want George Patton around. So because George Patton has been right next to Spielman's side and knows how Spielman works. So if we had to get rid of Spielman for some reason, I would want Patton there.
What's that GM's name? I think was in Seattle, and then they said he was an alcoholic, and then he ended up at the Redskins. And he's like, I'm not an alcoholic. He's good.
GM's names.
Either do I. But I've seen him at AA meetings. I like him. Spielman.
Scott McLaughlin.
Yeah, I think
McLaughlin.
so. I was going to say McGillicuddy's because that's a type of schnapps. As a guy he's been critical of Spielman, I do also want to say that I think that from a percentage perspective, he's been amazing in regards to his, the best way to put it is I've more so than anybody, there's been a lot of people who recently have like ex post factoed their way into this. I've always been critical of Spielman and the offensive line, and I know specifically people who aren't part of our network anymore used to tell me I was crazy for worrying about the offensive line and that we had a plan and so on and so forth. I do think it's been astounding how well a lot of while I do think they may have overinvested in the defense a little bit, kind of at the detriment of the offense, they at least have, on the defensive side of the ball, been remarkably good at identifying talent or developing it or both. I mean, you look at even like Sharif Floyd, who was really good but had that just weird complication from surgery. I don't think I think the outside of the obvious offensive line blind spot, I think they've been really bad at selecting wide receivers early in the draft. And there's a consistent thread there that I've written about before, especially when it comes to like taking guys from South Carolina for whatever reason. Troy Williamson, Sidney Rice. I think Jarius Wright was from South Carolina also. He was the best of the bunch and arguably the best receiver that's been taken since 2006. And I know Spielman didn't take over to 2012, but he was part of that triangle of authority or whatever back then too. And
didn't he draft like Greg Childs too?
Childs and like everyone loved him, but even though he had like a Brandon Roy situation and his knees exploded. Yeah. But it's been a lot of SEC guys, is my point. Do
you think that's why
we
refused to draft Butler? I think when Hakeem Butler was still on the board in like the 4th round, I think there was and everyone wanted him. I think there was some level to the Laquan Treadwell syndrome,
Well, maybe they learned their lesson.
That's what I'm thinking.
They got. I don't want to say lucky. I get a lot of shit for that, but you most teams can't rely on a 5th rounder and an undrafted free agent to do what these guys have done. Their plan, other than that, I mean, imagine if things worked out the way they thought they would, back when we took Treadwell and we were reliant on Treadwell as our number one guy. Like, that would have been a nightmare. So I think that has been the case there. But, I mean, you have to look at these. God, they're just like... And maybe it's Zimmer developing them too, but, man, they've been really good at who they take on defense in the high rounds. From Barr to Kendricks to Hunter to Everson Griffin, who I think was a 4th rounder. I mean, it's been...
Well, that's like Zimmer's like biggest claim to fame, isn't it? That like he hasn't missed on like a defensive player in the top few rounds like pretty much ever since he became like head coach. Like that's his biggest.
Who would be the worst person that they've taken 4th round and up on defense?
Sharif Floyd, but like not like talent wise, like he just didn't play because of injury. Like that's the one I can think of. Is there anybody else that I can't?
There was one I was
Mackenzie Alexander has turned it around. He was struggling for a while.
We'll have to look over that when we regrade the drafts.
Yeah,
Joe. Mm-hmm. But because you're even thinking of players like Stephen Weatherly, who was a 7th round pick, who's looking better, and you're looking at a lot of these. Holden Hill, but Holden Hill should have been a 2nd round pick if he didn't have the off the field stuff. So I don't give that much credit to Holden Hill. But you're looking at a lot of these players who have done well. I think obviously the misses have been more on offense, like Willie Beavers and Moritz Boehringer and stupid picks like that.
I will say Josh Robinson was a 3rd round pick. Gerald Hodges was a 4th round pick.
Oh, Gerald Hodges is a good one. But was Josh Robinson while Zimmer was coach?
No, he was before. Sorry. So Gerald Hodges was actually the first one that Zimmer was a coach. It was Scott Crichton was like the one. Yeah. So he
was like a 6th round pick too, right? Oh, he was 4th. Third. He was? Oh man. Yeah.
He was the 8th overall pick in the 3rd round.
Oh wow.
We picked Jerick McKinnon at the end of the 3rd after him. So.
Ooh.
God, I hope Jet does well with the 49ers.
I was just gonna say that, man. Like, the 49ers scare me a little bit in regards to NFC competition, but I like Jerick McKinnon and
Didn't they draft a running back too, though? So he has a lot of competition, I think.
Yeah, I never thought he'd be like a 1st down back anyway. I think we when he had some of that responsibility here, I think he's much better as a change of pace guy.
That injury totally screwed him, though.
Yeah.
Because it made them see what they had in their other running backs too.
What do you guys think of Madison?
I'll let Kirby go. I've talked a lot about Madison.
Yeah.
I like him. Just a quick.
I do too.
Sorry. Fact check on Ian, just because I have drafts pulled up. The 49ers took Jalen Hurd, who is technically a wide receiver, but he also plays like a scat back.
I thought they took a running back though too, didn't they?
No, they took Jalen Hurd, who was a wide receiver, but he
I know. I love Jalen Hurd. I wanted Jalen Hurd on the Vikings.
So did I. But Madison is, I think, a very solid pick. The positioning is what the position in the draft that he was taken was what's gonna maybe do him in over time.
You think they reached?
I don't know that they reached, but I don't know that they reached, but if you flip his pick and the Drew Samia pick, that's nobody is upset. It's literally just the fact that he has a 3rd round grade, and I do quotes because it was the very end of the 3rd round. He was essentially picked with a 4th round pick, a high 4th round.
And they had traded down at that point too, didn't they?
Right. Yeah, they had traded down a bunch in that round.
Yeah, and I think that they had their eyes on him for a while. I think that he fits in exactly what they want.
From what I heard, they were going to draft Michael Dieter if they stayed at 81.
I would have loved that pick, man. I would have been so happy.
After he was taken, they traded down a bunch.
I would have been ecstatic.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
I always wonder why we don't take Wisconsin linemen when they're right next door to us, and Spielman's kid plays for the Big Ten, And I think basically the line that Wisconsin had last year, all 5 of those guys are going to end up as relatively good starters in the NFL.
With where Spielman's kid played, I'm kind of surprised we didn't get Stanley Morgan Jr.
Maybe that's why we got Amir Abdullah. Because he played for Nebraska and he was like the best.
Yeah, I know, but that was before Spielman's kid was there.
This kid is in his mid-30s. He's what's that guy's name? Whedon or whatever that played. That was like 28.
Brandon Whedon.
Yeah. That panned out. I want
to ask too. Like, do you think that what are the rules? Like other GMs drafting Spielman's kid, like if he gets drafted, like.
That's a good question.
Because I feel like that doesn't seem fair. Like, I feel like the other GM should be like, okay, Rick, you can have him. Like,
you want your kid to make the team? Trade us Stephon Diggs for a 5th round.
Right? Like, oh man.
What is that brings in an interesting point. Like, what is the rule? What is the rules between executives and coaches and everything? And we've seen it before, I guess, with coaches coaching their sons because Pat Shermer's son is in the league now. How? Because there's tampering policies. Obviously, you can't contact other teams' players directly.
Don't wish your son a happy birthday without.
Yeah, does Pat Shermer Pat Shermer just has to he has to prison. He has to have guards there, and they talk through a divider on phones.
Well, doesn't Rick Spielman's brother have a job too in the NFL?
Yeah, he's an analyst.
He's an announcer.
He's an analyst now, but he used to be in a front office, I think, didn't he?
Oh, it's possible. I couldn't tell you.
He's also. I really don't like him as an analyst because he seems to think that every play should be 100% perfect. He's extremely critical of the human aspect of the game, as if he was the best linebacker of all time when he played. He just seems to really rag on people.
Well, even the little things, you wonder, if we're gonna, let's say Trayvon Diggs next year, it turns out has a bad year and turns out to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Do we reach to make Stephon happy?
Yeah,
I'll do anything to make Stephon happy.
Me too. Because I'm really afraid. I'm really upset he wasn't at OTAs that day. The last thing I wanted to cover, and Ian, this was your topic, so I'll let you run with it. Was Donovan McNabb?
Oh yeah. No, he should be in the Hall of Fame.
I think he should. I mean, I know we have a bad taste in our mouths because of what happened in 2010 or 2011 or whatever it was. I blacked that part out. But he was a top 3 quarterback for when he was in Philadelphia. They went to the NFC Championship how many times? Granted, they didn't ever win anything. I mean, they made it to the Super Bowl that one year. But he was really good.
But he wasn't his whole career either. So I compare him to
7-year period where he was a top 3 guy.
So is Eli Manning going to be in the Hall of Fame then too?
Yes. Eli Manning will be in the Hall of Fame because of 2 Super Bowls. That's a stupid thing, but he played in New York and he won 2 Super Bowls against Tom Brady. That's gonna put him in.
And who his brother is and who his dad is. You got to consider really quickly who's voting for these things, and there is an East Coast bias in all sports. But it's just guys like us.
Get it, and I hate to say this. Does he get in? Does he get an extra bump because he was an African American quarterback too? And he brought up that community. I'm not saying
that's the Rush Limbaugh take that got him fired from ESPN.
Yeah, it'll probably get me fired. But I think that when he said that he should get in the Hall of Fame, everybody, the first thing people were talking about was that he's the best black quarterback. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because that was all over Twitter.
Okay, he's the best quarterback. I mean, I see that, and that was really transformative time for that type of. You don't hear that a lot anymore. You know what I mean? Where
Moore and Moon were better than him.
Doug Williams won a Super Bowl. So he led the NFL in quarterback wins from 2000 to 2004. And he was fourth in wins during his 13-year career behind Favre, Manning, and Tom Brady. And you can say Andy Reid had a lot to do with that and all of that too. But
I don't like wins that.
He led the NFL in like touchdown percentage. His stats are pretty good.
Would you take Warren Moon over Donovan McNabb?
Yes.
Would you take McNabb over Donovan McNabb?
No.
Yes.
I take McNabb. Granted, I wasn't old enough to watch those things, but I feel like
he's not Hall of Fame.
Huh?
Is Warren Moon in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, he has to be.
Is he?
Hall of Fame, yeah. Pro Football Reference says he is.
Okay. Is Randall Cunningham?
No. Not currently, it looks like.
Would you rather have Michael Vick or Donovan McNabb?
Michael Vick.
Is Vick going to get in the Hall of Fame?
No.
No,
he can't because of his dog stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, he got cut down in his prime. Do you guys remember playing? Do you remember playing Madden around the time that Vic was in his prime?
He was a cheat code. Wasn't it 98?
2004.
Well, I was in college when we in our dorm we had a no Michael Vick policy. Similar.
Yeah, he was a cheat, because you could drop back for a pass, run it, and no one could catch it.
Yes, and it was like Odd Job in Goldeneye.
Yeah.
The guy that was so short that you had to aim down, so everyone else you didn't have to do that. So there's always like a no odd job rule. I'll instantly know if I dislike somebody if they say their favorite character is Odd Job. It was the same thing. I mean, his speed was a 99, but it had to be him and Moss had to be like at 150 behind the scenes. It's like those NBA Jam developers that came out a couple years ago and said that. I forget what team they hated, but they made it so that it was harder for them to make shots. Bulls. Was it the Bulls? I was thinking they were Bulls fans.
They were Pistons fans, so they made it so that the Bulls were, in the code, the Bulls were worse, statistically, in the last 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah, and you couldn't play as Michael Jordan because he had his own game, too, at the time.
So since we're talking about video games, in its prime, did you guys prefer Madden or
NFL 2K?
NFL Blitz? NFL Blitz.
I loved the NFL 2K. I had it for Dreamcast, and I just
NFL Blitz was the shit though. I loved NFL Blitz.
Blitz was great. NHL Hits was my jam in college, man. We used to get just super drunk and play that, or like Halo. Blitz was awesome.
And you hear NCAA football might be coming back?
I mean, I hope so, but also people the amount of money needed for likenesses is going to probably keep EA from actually doing it.
Yeah.
Which I kind of hope EA doesn't do it anyways because I don't like them as a company, but
EA sucks.
That also delves into a deeper problem of sorry guys, my third passion is video games and thinking about them. So that also delves into the issue of the money made off of video games now, especially sports video games, is all in Ultimate Team, and it's why the last 6 or 7 Maddens have been just hot garbage as far as anything other than Ultimate Team is concerned, and even Ultimate Team isn't good.
What's Ultimate Team?
It's like a fantasy, you buy card packs and you spend real money to become really good at the game because you're
it's like the Magic card game with football players.
Essentially, yeah.
This is a really good time. So we're opening a studio, and we're gonna be doing video stuff there, and part of that's gonna be we're gonna have a big screen and a couple a couch and a recliner, and we're gonna do a lot of Twitch related stuff like Madden Mondays. Shout out to Drew for that. He did that for a while when he was working with us. us playing like Tecmo Bowl against one another, and people can follow us there. So we'll announce our Twitch channel soon. I'm actually, after I get off this show, going to go grab a desk for the office. So it should be open within the next few weeks, but we're definitely going to do a lot more video and Twitch stuff, which will be cool. Speaking of which, we should probably wrap this up because I got to drive to God knows where to get that desk. This has been a special edition of Morning Joe's. I wanted to thank both of you guys for coming on. I wanted to shout out Vikings on the Clock and SKOL Sessions. I think the show is a really good representation of what you guys do there and what you guys do in general. So stay tuned to that. Check out purpleterritoryradio.com for all of the different podcasts that we have. We also work with KNSI Sports out of St. Cloud. We work with KLGR Sports in Redwood Falls. We're going to do our first on-air segment on June 4th. Joe Oberle's going to go on to discuss OTAs, and every week we'll have a different writer or podcaster live on their radio station out of Redwood Falls. Beyond that, we work with the North Star Sports Podcast. We work with the Climbing the Pocket guys. We work with Skull Hole. Our buddy Luke Braun, who works for Locked On Vikings, his show will be on there now, and also the entire network of Twins Daily, like Lehman and the Geek and so on, is also going to be on there. So it's really a one-stop spot for all Minnesota sports podcasts, which we're pretty excited about. But we've been churning out a lot of new content every single day. Make sure to check out both Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory for all of that. And stay tuned as we're going to be doing a lot of video stuff, as I mentioned. So you'll want to subscribe both to our YouTube channel, which is Vikings Territory, excuse me, and also follow Viking Territory, so with all the plural, Viking Territory on Twitter or on Periscope, where we do the lunch break, which we'll do another in a few days, I take it.
Probably on Saturday.
Yeah, we'll get back to our regular schedule.
We'll back Saturday.
Joe will be back, and we'll do another regular Morning Joe's on Tuesday at 9:30. So tune into that live. Thanks to everybody on iHeartRadio who's been listening to the show and sharing it, because it's been amazing. I feel like our show's finally taken off, so I'm really excited about that. But thanks again, guys, for coming, and we'll chat. But this has been Morning Joe's. Thanks, everybody, and Skol.
Skol.
Skol.